Hey guys, welcome back to another Business Bits with Caleb, Ryan, and Jim. I'm super excited to hang out with you guys today. We're going to be talking about how to properly own rentals and manage rental properties, and give you guys 5 tips that we think can help make any investor successful starting out. So, Jim, do you want to start us off with tip number one?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to the tenant screening. And where a breakdown comes and happens is when you put the wrong tenant in there, a lot of issues can come up. So, like Ryan, we've had some horror stories with putting the wrong tenants in there. Do you remember that time where we went through all the legal stuff? And will you tell that story on when we put the wrong tenant in the property?
Well, so my most infamous story when it pertains to rentals is the very first one that I ever had. It wasn't with you. And it was the reason that I chose to then not have communication directly with tenants. So helped someone actually out of a short sale. This was way back when short sales actually weren't all that common. And at the same time purchasing a rental property, so she needed a place to move into, and I'm like, well, I wanted to help her out and get her into a new place. So went from her house that she owned but was losing due to foreclosure, but we saved it from foreclosure with a short sale, to now she was going to be renting our property. Well, I was young. I was 22, 23, maybe 24, somewhere in that range, and she just happened to see the big S on my forehead and took advantage of some kindness. And long story really short was, after we finally did end up getting her out, she owed over $10,000 in back rent and additional items. And I got a call from the person that she was renting her next place to, and she put $3,000 deposit on that place. So it was a big kick in the pants, that's for sure. After all that, didn't recoup any, because she then filed for bankruptcy.
So that's not actually the story I wanted you to tell. I was thinking of the time Ryan and I had a deal where we're buying a house, and we actually were intending to flip it and fix it up and flip it. And Ryan looks this tenant in the eye and says, "Hey, I'll give you a couple $1,000s if you move out on this property." We shake hands on it, and then when we end up buying the house, he ends up squatting in it for a year and a half and working the legal system. And what happened, and when we say poor tenant screening, what we would have found out with going through CaseNet, and which is kind of where all the Missouri courts are, is we would have found a track record of this individual kind of working the system and knowing how to kind of play the game, so to speak. So we kind of took somebody on their word from it, and then ended up costing us about 18 months of owning a house we wanted to flip that we weren't able to even get access to begin that process. So poor tenant screening is what it comes down to. So, like, what do you guys think as far as ways to properly screen? Like what are some good tips on how to do that?
So real quick before we move on, I did the exact same thing Ryan did with my third house that I ever bought as a rental, and had a lady live there for 6 months. I was buying it as a tax sale, and I was going to let her rent the house that she was losing to taxes. And some reason I thought she'd pay me rent. I can't believe we both did the same thing. That's crazy. Sorry, properly screening. So I think having really good standards is important. Yes, tenants, you can have looser standards than like a traditional mortgage, but running a credit score. And the other cool thing about checking their credit scores, if you let them know some different auto pay resources will let you put those payments on their credit, so then they can help build their credit, so you can help them become a homeowner. I think that's a really cool like give take that you can help with tenants. Some other really, really good screening ideas. Past landlords are key. Talk to 2 or 3 past landlords or past residents, because you would have found out, for Ryan's point, that next guy probably got screwed by that person too. And now, you being a landlord, you have to be really careful about what you say. I know particularly in Illinois, there's some strict laws about that, but you can say if somebody owes you money still. You can say if somebody didn't always pay on time. You just got to make sure you don't slander them. What about you guys? Do you have any other ideas?
Well, and this is such an important part of it, guys, because like we're telling you kind of like the horror stories and the times where it hasn't worked. But when it works, when you get that right tenant in there, everything else goes so smoothly, and everything else is like an amazing experience when you get that right person in. So this is something to not skip over, not to get too busy for or anything like that. If you do this improperly, you're going to cost yourself hours and hours of your life, and potentially even courtroom visits of your life, with depending on how poor the tenant is, right?
Yeah, and tens of thousands of hours. I have some amazing tenants that lived in properties for 6-7 years that upgrade the properties, have taken care of them, and I like still to this day I'm friends with them. Some of them are probably going to watch this podcast episode, and we've had a really great landlord-tenant relationship.
And on the opposite end of that spectrum, Sister Pat, shout out to you if you're listening to this. She's been a tenant of mine and one of my properties for since like 2010. So, one of my longest standing tenant, and we're buddies. Every once in a while we'll go to lunch or whatnot and hang out. So, that property obviously is like a crazy passive experience for me because she's been an amazing, wonderful tenant. It's been a wonderful experience to provide housing for her. So.
All right. Number 2 was professionally managing expectations. What do you have for some tips and tricks, Ryan or Jim, that you would say about professionally managing expectations for either management or running your own management of your properties?
This is Ryan's baby. You go for it, buddy.
It's not really. So here's what I would say on managing expectations. I believe, and based on that first story that I just told, and then Jim, based on the story of what you said with regards to the other person who did end up being a professional squatter, my opinion is never get emotional with regards to tenants. Always set clear, concise expectations as it pertains to how you want everything to be handled. That's from a maintenance request to your payments to the inevitable that when they're late, what happens. As long as you set everything and you have standard operating procedures or set operating procedures for yourself, then you can look at those and say, okay, if I do deviate from them, why? And if you deviate from them, what's your new set of expectations with that? So I'll share with you just a story from actually Hawk, who's in the office right now. He's dealing with a tenant right now who is almost 30 days late. And I told him, hey, if you're going to try to work it out, just make sure you set new expectations. What are those expectations? And set very clearly that if they don't hit those expectations, what's the outcome? The outcome is at that point an eviction, right? So to me, it's just making sure you set them up front. Remind people, hey, I'm late. Well, okay, you're late, and just so you know, when you're late, this is what occurs. We went over this, right? You have to remind people what the expectations that you set as well.
And with a lot of tenants, if you give them an inch of past what an expectation is, they're going to try to take a mile.
And the thing about it too, like what's nice is you're kind of doing it for yourself too, because we all want to be nice and we want to, we want to help people out if they're, like when in need, right? And you're also like disrespecting yourself too at that point, right? Because like we have bills as landlords to pay, and for me, what's been really the setting of the expectations has been very helpful because it's like a safe way for me to then call back that expectation. And it's even as simple as like setting it like this is just good business fundamentals, right? Like with a team member, like in a task, like, hey, if I need some help with a task, I need you to like get it done, tell me you got it done. If you didn't get it done, I need you to tell me why it didn't get done. And if you do that, we're okay. I'm okay if it didn't get done for whatever reason, as long as you talk to me. If you don't talk to me about it and it doesn't get done, you just forgot about it, well, that's not okay. And we're going to need to have discussions over that. But if I have that conversation with people up front, then it avoids, then they know. And then it avoids me being, feeling like an overbearing the boss or whatnot, right? So the same thing is exactly true for tenants. So like Ryan, like what would you do if you're Hawk on the property? Like what's the exact conversation you would have now that he has a late tenant or tenant that's going to be late?
Well, the very first thing I would do is I would go back and say, hey, remember we went through what your lease says. If you are late, here's how it's outlined. You're late right now. So these are the penalties. These are the ramifications. We now have, standard operating procedure, if you will, for how we operate. We notify someone twice during that late period, if you will. So they're late, they miss a payment, they're notified, then they're notified another time and told, hey, what can you expect if you don't pay by the next date? If they don't pay by the next date, well, they're going to receive an eviction notice. So it's very black and white as to how we would handle it and how I would handle it if I were him, because he probably hasn't set that expectation. Is just go back to the lease, reset the expectations, say, hey, we cannot get more than 1 month behind. If for some reason we do, this is the result, just so you know up front. It's an emotional thing because it's a house and someone lives there, and yet the more you can leave emotions out of it, the better, really, for all parties, because it's really black and white. Either you hit it or you don't.
Yeah, and then they know what to expect too. They're going through a hard time. They know, okay, well, I need to do this, or I need to make other plans. It's not this ambiguity or this unclear thing on what's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, number 3, not enough experience or systems in trying to do it yourself. For me, I kind of want to talk on this one because I remember back when I first started out, I had never learned on systems. I didn't know what systems were. Nobody had taught me about them. I was self-managing 18 units off of a notes on my iPhone. And it cost me so much money. And the worst thing was the time aspect, that me not having a system for having them auto draft or auto pay, and I went and picked up the rent. Thinking back, I went and picked up 18 people's cash rent or checks on the first of the month, and I was chasing people for weeks and weeks. Once I brought in a management company, though, that had good systems and had the auto pays, it was really, really time efficient and worth it for me.
Hey there, if you're looking to get the ultimate edge for your real estate investing company, go to doorstodeals.com/invest for more information. Just so you know, a high percentage of the people that we interview on this podcast are actually already Three Doors Network members. And our network members have a lot of extra resources. They have access to an online training vault with over 3 years worth of content in it. They have access to vendor savings like our Home Depot discount that's literally saved thousands of dollars for members. And we have a weekly group coaching call, and we have a lot of other great things as well as part of the Three Doors Network. So make sure that you check it out on doorstodeals.com/invest.
Once I brought in a management company, though, that had good systems and had the auto pays, it was really, really time efficient and worth it for me. And there are some good services now that I didn't know about then. One's Clear Now. It's a really easy auto payment. So that can be a very simple system for you for collecting your rent. So you don't have to try to collect that cash, because the quicker you can get away from collecting cash, the better off you're going to be.
You were figuring out if you... let me get this straight. You're figuring out or keeping track of tenants paid you on like Post-it notes. Is that what you said?
No, on my notes app on my phone. Yeah, so my phone had a notes app. I was like 23 years old at this point, 24, and all I cared about was how many houses could I rehab and hold on to, and it stayed on the notes tab, and ended up, I got very, very long. I had to write notes and notes and notes about people's rents. Not fun, not a good system. So then I hired a property management company right after that, and my profitability soared. All right, number 4, and this I think is probably one of the biggest mistakes I would say that as we were putting this list together that new investors or just investors make, period, about owning rental properties, and it's not having enough money in reserves. Jim, you want to talk about any issues you've ever had or some stuff you've heard about not having enough money in reserves?
Well, there's a strategy that's called the BRRRR strategy. So if you haven't heard of that, it's you buy it, you rehab it, you refinance it, and then you repeat the process. And we really, Three Doors Funding, we help give loans to people who want to do that, and we do that quite a bit actually. Plug for the hard money lending arm of ours, but the exciting part about that is you can potentially get into these rentals for $0 down, right? If you're able to buy it at a price and do the value add after the renovations, and that's great. But if you don't have any reserves and you have 10 properties or you have 15 properties that you bird, what happens if the roof starts to leak? What happens if the toilet needs to get refixed? Like it's inevitable that issues are going to happen. I mean, Ryan and I have had a tenant. What was the tenant? The tenant broke up with her boyfriend, and the boyfriend decided to try and burn the house down with her in it. I mean, we've had some crazy stuff, right? Which also, by the way, make sure you have a quality insurance agent. We have some referrals for you if you need a good if you need a good insurance agent. But yeah, you want to definitely have a rainy day fund to make sure that you're okay, because just if you're running this so tight and trying to grow it so fast, that one misstep can knock the whole thing down. That's that's a shame. Like a part of the game of business is the art of staying in the game, right, and not getting knocked out. So reserves are a big deal to make sure that you're kind of keeping aware of.
And what would you say is a healthy amount of reserves to have, in your opinion?
Ryan, what do you think, man?
Well, so what we anticipate on our properties, is 10% repairs for 10% of the rents for repairs. So I would, at the very minimum, keep 10% of whatever you're expecting rents-wise in reserves. And as you mentioned, that's likely not going to cover a roof or an HVAC. So here's the good thing, though. If you do keep 10% in reserves 1 year and then the next year and then the third year, and you only use 5%, well, luckily that third year, then you have 20%. So if you build up every single year, 10% would be my recommendation. Have 10% every year, and then you'll eventually be able to pay for those items.
And I've had other investors that talk about, trying to have like 3 months of fixed expenses, 3 to 6 months of what the monthly expenses are going to be, as well as a nice safety net. I mean, ultimately, it does vary a little bit depending on the types of deals you're doing too. Like a big multi-million-dollar apartment complex versus a $50,000 just traditional rental, or $100,000 traditional rental. It is going to vary a little bit.
And this is where living below your means is very key. Not spending every dollar you make. As you guys buy those rentals, don't keep increasing your lifestyle. Don't raise your lifestyle costs with the extra money you make. Use that money to reinvest so you can grow quicker and become financially free. Number 5, and this is a good one. So many people hire the wrong property manager. Look, we want to talk about some signs of a good one, signs of a bad one. Jim, Ryan, I'm sure you guys have interviewed a bunch. I've interviewed a bunch. My favorite thing when I interviewed my first property manager is he actually was able to educate me on what good and bad properties were, not just educating me on what good and bad buys were, but also he looked into my business and saw where my business had room for growth. And that was a really cool coaching opportunity that made me choose the property manager I did, is because we had a sit down like coaching conversation and where he looked over what rentals do I have, what was my plan, and he gave me some notes and stuff. No other property manager had done that I interviewed. So I thought that was a really, really cool thing to look for.
Yeah. And I think, if you know where the rental property can fall apart, that's really the interviewing criteria in my mind. And it's exactly what we just shared. Like, how are you screening these tenants? how many do you go through? What's your criteria? What's your marketing for them? And I wanted to have a kind of a deep knowledge on what they're doing there. And then also how do you manage expectations? And if something goes wrong, what system do you have in place to keep track of it and to give the tenant that's, in essence, our client, to give them a good experience. So, really, it's just kind of going through with that, guys, in my opinion. And then seeing who you feel like does it at the highest level based on the conversations that you have. Ryan, what do you think, man?
Well, one of the recommendations I would make is hire someone who actually owns rental properties themselves. Right? They're not just an operator of a business, but they also have some kind of an investment. It's similar to, you don't want to educate yourself with someone who's never, if you're on the listing side, who's never listed a property. You don't want to have someone teach you how to do a rehab if they've never rehabbed a property. You want someone who owns and has experience in owning themselves. And the other reason that I say this is because in my experience in talking to property management companies, it's a very difficult business. High volume, low margins. So the people who have had some success in it typically are those people who have a property management out of necessity, not out of, I want a property management company. Well, I want a property management company because I own 100 rental units and it makes sense for me to have my own, and I'm willing to take on some other clients. So those to me are probably the ones I would recommend to go with. Those are who we've gone with in the past and had some success with. And just an FYI, it's a difficult business. So please understand that there's not a lot of great companies out there.
Well, yeah. And I think that's a big mistake, is that investors will just shop rates and say, hey, well, this person can do it for 6% and you're telling me 10%. Guys, it's the same thing as flipping a home in essence. Like one of the profit centers on flipping a home is controlling the rehab costs. One of the critical pieces of having a profitable rental is managing it properly. And I'm sorry, but you don't always want to go with the cheapest option. You need to go with a professional option that will keep your clients and tenants happy. If you have a good tenant, they're not going to leave and move out and you have a vacancy that you shouldn't have, because whenever they try and call a property manager, no one picks up the phone, no one answers, no one returns their phone calls. So it's what's that saying that we say sometimes? You can try and pick up pennies to walk away from dollars.
Yeah, don't lose dollars tripping over pennies.
Yeah, I knew I was going to mess it up.
Something like that.
I've said that saying 100 times, but I think investors sometimes get so conscientious on trying to shave costs and cut pennies, and in some areas you just shouldn't. If you're doing a flip, you try and shave pennies on a kitchen. Well, guess what? The woman, the wife of the family that looks at that kitchen and thinks it sucks, she's walking away. She's not even buying the darn thing, much less getting yourself a multiple offer because you really made a quality product in there, right? So I don't know. We've never really been. We've been pretty fortunate when we've hired property managers that already have enough to where we can say, hey, well, will you give us a little bit better rate because I'm giving you 30 properties. So I think that's a little bit different than when I was just starting out and I just had one. I wasn't hey, give me a better rate than what you got because I'm going to end up with 30 houses. A property manager worth their salt's already going to be kind of busy, and they're not going to want to deal with that. You might be turning away from somebody that would have been a good fit from you, by trying to shave some pennies there.
Cool. Well, I think that's all we have today. Just to recap, we went over the 5 mistakes. So hopefully you guys don't make any of those mistakes. Thanks for tuning in to another Doors to Deals with Jim, Ryan, and myself. We'll look forward to seeing you guys next week. That's the bits, baby. Additional resources, go to doorstodeals.com/097. If you're looking to grow your investment income, email me at cdavis@3doors.com. And finally, never give up.
Thanks for tuning into this show. For more episodes and resources that will unlock Doors to Deals, check out our website, doorstodeals.com.